All right, so hi, as introduced, my name is Miwa Matreyek, and I am an animator, designer, and performer. I recently transplanted with my family to Vancouver from Los Angeles, where I lived and worked for almost 15 years. Today I'll be talking about my latest performance piece, Infinitely Yours, and my exploration into the embodied representations of a changing world and what that means to me. But first, some background on my work. I create live performances that integrate my kaleidoscopic animations with body and space on stage. I have a solo practice, as seen above, as well as a collaborative theater company, Cloud Control. With both, my work attempts to make invisible worlds visible while weaving surreal and poetic narratives of creation and destruction, micro and macro worlds, and the conflict between humanity and nature. In my solo work, the performance centers around my shadow silhouette that I cast as I move behind the projection screen. By combining rear projection and front projection upon a single screen, I can create complex visual compositions and illusions as my shadow becomes an integrated part of the moving image. With over 15 years of tinkering, I've pushed this interdisciplinary technique of layered projections to create increasingly complex images, even with a straightforward setup. Again, just front and rear projection in my shadow. In January of 2020, I premiered my latest solo piece, Infinitely Yours. This piece was inspired by my own climate anxiety, becoming more and more heightened over the last 7 to 8 years. Even though climate crisis has been an issue we've all been aware of for a long time, it feels like that in the last decade or so, there has been increasing media coverage, and the real-life effects on our daily lives have become undeniable. As someone who until recently lived in Los Angeles, the annual wildfires feel like they're spiraling out in scale and frequency as they become increasingly destructive. Every region has an aspect of climate change that affects the inhabitants' daily lives, whether it be superstorms, fires, flooding, drought, sea level rise, and pollution, etc. In the early process of making Infinitely Yours, I was collecting and cataloging news items and images of climate change. This note-taking function as a form of world building, even though it's the actual world, to help imagine the kind of moments I wanted to weave into the piece. From there, I made rough conceptual sketches of the symbolic experiences that embody the moments of climate crisis in the news. Then I began designing and testing, building images and animation to test how I would integrate my shadow silhouette into the imagery. Shadow has been a rich medium for me to play with, and I am still making discoveries. Shadow is common, familiar, quotidian, yet mysterious and otherworldly, and just as alive as the body and light that creates the shadow. Shadow is dimensional, yet flat. Shadow is both specific, as in only I can make my very specific shadow shape, yet anonymizing, as it reduces most of my visual details. By combining my onstage shadow with pre-made animation, I could play with the language of cinema and theater. I choreographed the visual storytelling with cinematic tropes such as close-ups, zooms, pans, and POV shifts. Theater is a medium that creates an empathetical bridge between what happens on stage and the audience. By being in a shared, intimate space together, mirror neurons are engaged as the audience is taken on an emotional journey along with the performer. There is an empathetical buy-in that happens in theatrical spaces, an emotional investment in story that comes from showing up to a space together, sharing breath, and being vulnerable together. Because my work is live, there is always a risk of mistake or failure, and the illusions are never perfect to the millisecond and millimeter. I could easily have made my work as a short film with a silhouette figure shot on a green screen and made every illusion perfect to the pixel. However, that would have reduced the experience and the emotional impact of the work and would have missed the point. I am much rather interested in the space that engages with audience perception in the moment. In this scene, I was trying to create a sense of weightlessness. In my work, I often play with sleight of hand between what is real and what is not real. I believe that magic is an interactive two-way process. It needs a live, intimate, real-life shared space and an audience who shows up with generosity to take a leap of faith to help complete the illusion. Magic exists in physical space, a perceived transformation of something that is tangible and real. And magic exists somewhere between the artist's intention and audience perception. Shadow also lets me transform and transcend my body. As a shadow, my body becomes an abstraction and can represent something that is larger than life. As a shadow, my body can represent an individual, humanity, or the earth itself as Gaia or the biosphere. My body can become the creator and the one who is created, the destroyer and the one who is destroyed, all at the turn of a dime. As a performer, I am very aware of my facial and body expressions in silhouette. Curiosity, tenderness, joy, fear, despair. As humans, we can't help but be cued into people's facial expressions and body movements. The audience engages in deciphering these emotions in my performance, even if what they see is just an outline of a face and gestures in shadow. As an artist, I am fascinated to play with drawing the audience in emotionally while making a connection to metaphorical experiences of symbolic characters. How can I embody the earth as a performer in shadow while drawing the audience in to feel a connection to the emotions being expressed? What kind of visceral impact can I create for the audience? For example, in this moment, my shadow represents an individual screaming in her car while stuck in traffic. This is a very familiar experience for most people. At a turn, my shadow becomes larger than life, towering over an oil field. I dig my hand into the ground, pull out oil, and shove it into my mouth. I imagine this as both an everyday individual person's experience, as well as a symbol of humanity's experience of gas guzzling. I have a few moments of similar perspective shifts woven throughout the piece. While making this piece, I was thinking about the concept of the ecological self, a term coined by Arnie Ness. This is the idea of identifying ourself as not only our skin-encapsulated ego, but imagining the wider, interconnected natural world around us as part of ourself. The plants that clean the air and produce oxygen can be considered as part of our lungs, as without them, our lungs would not function. The idea makes a direct connection that only when the natural world is thriving can humans thrive, and that when the world is unwell, we are unwell. Environmentally responsible behavior is truly in our self-interest, and a form of self-preservation. How can I make the ecological self manifest as a visual metaphor in performance? How can I further make a visual metaphor for human civilization and the impact we have on the earth? I was also thinking about the concept of solastalgia, coined by Glenn Albrecht. Solastalgia is the emotional or existential distress caused by environmental change, namely climate catastrophe. It is a mourning for the loss of the familiar natural world around us. How can this concept be embodied in performance? How might the audience feel as they're confronted with these images? It has been striking to me how various scenes in this piece kept feeling relevant in the moment again and again. I originally imagined the opening scene depicting wildfires while feeling distress about the wildfires in California in 2018. Then there was the Amazon rainforest wildfires in 2019, then the wildfires in Australia and all over California in 2020, and on, in which several friends lost their homes in 2020. I also wove a lot of my daily life into this project. The garbage that's been pouring the garbage that's seen pouring out of my body and filling the oceans is my own plastic trash that I recorded in loops. The process of using my trash in my work led me to do monthly plastic audits of my trash to assess where I can make different choices in how I consume. The oil field in this piece was built from photos and videos I had shot when I came across an oil field while on a road trip through Central California many years prior to making the project. Throughout the piece, my home, the objects around my house, and my life were woven into the tapestry of the work. I intended for Infinitely Yours to be a surreal, beautiful, and violent piece, digging into the climate grief that many of us are feeling, and shaking it out like an exorcism. I hope that the piece fosters conversation and a new way of looking at how we live our lives in the modern world and the systems that uphold our societies. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, very nice.